This is something I've been working on for a lifetime. At this point in my life, I'm 69 years old. I've had years and years, oh my God, more years than you can even imagine, of experience in business. All the way from starting as a call center agent way back in the 70s to being a CEO and president as I am today. But you do have a need to learn and gain information from some of the experience, hopefully, that I've had that'll give you some benefits. That's just from all of the experience I've had, all of the time put in, all of the risks I've taken and the failures I've faced and the success that I seem to have found. So being the guy that I am, I started writing a book because I figured, okay, well, maybe someday someone will see this somewhere, pick it up, it'll plant a seed for them, and they'll get some of the lessons that I've worked hard to learn. So with that, the book is called Lessons I've Learned in No Particular Order. Join in, listen, send me some questions. At least I can give you my opinion on things and maybe give you some insight. It's really something that I wish I had when I was growing up in the business. I did grab onto a couple mentors, and all unbeknownst to them, those are the people that I learned with. So let me share with you some of the lessons I've learned in no particular order. Hey everybody, it's Steve Biederman. Good morning. It's Friday the 13th. I think that means we're supposed to be a little scared, but actually I'm excited today. I get the opportunity to talk to you from my hotel room. As you can see, a really nice one. It looks like a cell, a prison. But I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, doing some business, but also casual at the same time. And I didn't want to let the week out without having a chance to share some stuff with you. So listen, today we're talking about pace over perfection. But before I talk about that, let me go backwards a little bit and talk to you about lessons I've learned in no particular order. The in no particular order piece is probably the most important. We all learn lessons in our life, but do we learn those lessons in order, or do we just learn lessons as life goes on? And I think it's that. So as I began to work in business and build up what I learned, I never really stopped to say, what are the three things this week I've learned? What am I planning to learn next week? Instead, work happened, challenges happened. I faced different experiences. And through those experiences, there was a point in my own career where I began to look backwards and say, what do I know? And what do I believe in? And through those, I began to examine who am I? What is this cum effect of everything that has gone on in my life, especially in my career? And I began to jot them down one after the other. But as I began to think about them, again, there was no particular order. I just put one, then I put another. And today I ended up with pace over perfection. So let's talk about pace, and let's talk about why, to me, that's one of the most vital pieces of being a leader and a manager in a business. So I want to tell you a couple stories. Years ago, I had decided to begin to buy companies. I felt that my business, which was a technology business servicing contact centers, was ready. We had a lot of sales coming in from direct sales, but we were really looking to kind of take control of our segment, and we began to examine the idea of buying businesses. So I got an investment banker. We went out and we began to look at different businesses. And these were long conversations, and it was tedious, and it really wasn't meeting what my internal clock said, because I went from January to September and I still hadn't really gotten deep into buying businesses. So one day my investment banker comes to me and he says, a competitor is getting ready to buy another business that was also a competitor. So it was a consolidation of that industry. And I said, gosh darn it, why didn't I find out about that first? So I was pretty disappointed. A couple weeks went by, and my investment banker called me back. And he said, that business has still not closed. And I said, okay, well, I don't know a lot about it, but what's the cost? And I asked a few pertinent questions. I knew a little bit about the business that was going to be acquired. And I said, hey, John, call them up, please, and tell them I would buy their business now, this week. I'll do it, in fact, without due diligence. And he said, you can't do that. I said, no, I can do that. Please give him a call. He said, I can't do that. I represent you. You can't just buy a business without due diligence. So I said, okay, John. So I called the company and I said, look, I know you're being acquired by another company. Have they met your goals? And they said to me, we've run into a few problems. I said, tell me, what are those problems? And they told me what they were. And as quick as I got off that call, or before I got off that call, I said, look, I will buy your business. I will increase your price. Tell me when you want to close, and I'll crunch time between now and then to, in fact, make sure that we are able to learn a bit about your business. So he said, really, you would do that? And I said, yeah. So hung up. I bought that business. The company that was intending to was pretty upset, but they had been taking a lot of time going through their planning, their thinking, their renegotiating, and I just walked in and I bought the business. Now, did that business have its problems? Sure it did. Was there something about that seemed a little too quick? Sure. But I bought the business. That business was a stepping stone to my growth as a company. Again, about it was really 6 months later. We had just finished integrating this company in. About 6 months later, I find out that that same company that was to buy that business that I ended up buying found another business to buy. And I without thinking, I called up the that business that uh, was available, and I did the same thing. And I said, "Look, you know us, you know what we're about. I know a bit about you. I'd like to acquire your business, but you tell me what you want." And I will find a way to form a term package that gives you what you want. Might not be in exactly the way you're hoping for. It may not be all cash, but it'll be in a term that assures you of ultimately getting what you want. One of the things I need to know is how quickly can we close? And he said, well, I would close today. And I said, but realistically, you tell me, you pick a date. I promise you that that's the date we're going to close. You picked a date. He said, I'm talking to this other company. I said, I know, but have you signed a letter of intent yet? Well, no, we're getting ready to. They've been telling me for about 2 weeks they're going to get it to me. I'm hoping to get it this weekend. I said, well, give me 15 minutes, check your email. You'll have a letter of intent. I gave him the letter of intent. I beat out that other company. And so now I had two companies within 6 months, maybe 9 months, actually, once everything was said and done. And we took those two companies and used them as a platform to become what I would call a player in that industry. And we hit, because of those acquisitions, inflection points, and a number of issues that we faced were the kind that we just learned how to face. And through that, we went forward. We had a great journey, and in fact we became one of the global leaders in that industry at that time. And I firmly believe it's because we acted while the other company was thinking. Remember, it's a competitive landscape. And, I get that it's frightening. I get that sometimes you'll make a mistake and it could be really hard to deal with that mistake. But remember, you can always make a different choice the next day. And in fact, our next lessons I've learned is going to be about that, and exactly about the fact that we need to learn how to make decisions. Decisions are a key piece of learning exactly how to keep the pace going. Now, I say pace over perfection. So let me give you an example of where I put perfection over pace, and let me give you a result of that. So my business was selling contact center technology on premise at that time. And we had thousands of customers. We were very active in what we were doing, and we were really doing well. My team came to me and said they would like to begin to host the product, meaning it's not on premise anymore, it's in the cloud, as we all are today. But at that time it was a new concept. So I was a little scared of it. And here's why. We were earning on the average, our average sale was about $112,000. We were getting all of that cash at the point that we completed the implementation. We also had 20% of that purchase price for continuing revenue in terms of support. So we were doing very well. I didn't want to upset the apple cart. So I was scared of hosted. Well, my fear was about being scared that I was going to disrupt what I already had going. All right, and that's a valid fear. But I forced my team to prove to me that they could implement a hosted business in a great way that met all the goals of meeting promises and being capable and being determined to do the best for our clients. Well, there was a team, they put things together. The company, the employees were very excited. They had an initiative that they had invented that they wanted to implement. Well, they kept coming back to me, showing me that they were ready. I continued and I continued to put them off. And I put them off not because their planning wasn't legitimate. The honest to God truth was I put them off because I was scared about what that might do to my core business. I knew I couldn't go to them and say, how is that going to damage my core business? I didn't want that negative thinking. And I knew that it was something we should do, but I continued to put it off. Well, get this, I put it off for over a year. This team continued to learn about the business, to perfect everything that they were thinking and doing. And eventually I had no way to say anything but yes. So finally, after a year, I said, all right, let's implement it. I'm still scared. We're going to implement it. But the one thing I knew for sure is they had figured it out. Hosted was going to be a perfect implementation. It was going to be a perfect symbiotic relationship with the client's need and experience. So we start to implement. One deal after the other deal began to fail. Not fail where they threw the system out, but fail to where there were problems that hadn't been anticipated, or problems even when they were anticipated had not been thought through. And so it's funny, that business that we had prepared for a year still had problems. There was no perfection. The problems that faced were similar to the problems almost every project faces, which is living in the real world is different than planning for that real world. So inevitably, that business, by the way, did take off. It did really well. It didn't undermine my other business. And we ended up, being very effective in what we were doing. So I didn't lose anything that I could validate from putting it off a year in terms of the fact that maybe I could have been more successful. Maybe I could have made more sales. I'm not sure that happened. Well, maybe there's an analysis that would show that, but that wasn't the real impact. What the lesson I learned was is that no matter how I prepare, no matter how smart we are, and no matter all of the planning that we have gone through, inevitably we're still going to face real life. And if I would have done that earlier, I may have gained traction earlier. But I certainly didn't need to waste people's time for a year now, did I? Because I don't think I did. And here's the other impact of it. That year, I had a fairly demoralized team of staff who was working on this, feeling that no matter what they did, I wasn't going to trust them. I wasn't going to give them the latitude to go forward and do something because they believed in it. And fortunately, when we got to do the business, they were so scared to make a mistake that unfortunately that became an issue in itself. And they were scared to make a mistake because I had put so much pressure on them to be perfect. Pace over perfection. I didn't learn my lesson there, but I have learned it since. Let me give you another example. I was given the opportunity, this company that I'm talking about, to make a decision to take it over and own it. And I was given about an hour to make that decision. I walked in that morning, I was working within that business. The owners came up to me and said, "We're going to close the business. We don't think it's viable. And sorry, at the end of the day or week, whatever that was at the time, we're going to close the business." Now, that business at that time had a really good technology product, but it only had 5 customers. And all of those customers had already paid. So there was no money coming in. The business actually had $1.2 million of debt, and I didn't have any money. In fact, I hardly had a relationship with the single developer that had developed the product. But I had been a part of those 5 sales to those 5 customers, and those 5 customers meant a heck of a lot to me. And I knew darn well that as a mission critical product that we had sold into their contact center, that if we left, if we closed, if we failed them, we could kill their business because they were fully attached and centered on our product. And I just couldn't do it. I didn't know how to run a business at that time. I didn't really want to be a CEO at that time. I didn't have money, and I didn't want to go home and tell my family I was going to make a decision like this. So in frankly, in every way, it didn't make any sense to take on that business, except for one thing. My integrity didn't let me abandon those customers. So I talked to the developer and I said, hey Nick, what are we going to do here? They're going to close this business, and what should we do? How do we care for these customers? And we didn't really know. We had some ideas, but we weren't sure what to do. And so I got about an hour into it. The owners came up to me and said, "So what are you doing? Are you going to leave with us?" And I said, "No, I can't leave." They said, "Well, if you're going to stay, we're going to give you all the debt. We'll sign it over to you, but we want no pain and no misery if we walk out. It's all yours." So Nick and I, what did we do? We said, "Okay, we'll do it. We'll take it." An hour. It took 1 hour. Pace over perfection. That business inevitably became one of the global leaders in its industry. And it didn't do it because we were the smartest, but it did do it because we learned about getting things done and moving, moving, and moving. There's another thing I want to talk about when it comes to this. Oftentimes, when you're selling a complex product, like the one that we have and many of you may have, you're selling that product and it's a long sales cycle. It can go months, it can go in fact into years. Sometimes there's lots of details and lots of benchmarks that you're facing along the way. So what does pace versus perfection have to do with that? So assuming that you have a deal and it takes a year to get done, you're going to have a number of touch points with that potential customer. And those touch points are, everyone, critical, because every single touch point is an opportunity to show how interested you are, how capable you are, show your integrity, show your value system, and it's also potentially going to show the opposite of that. So, also, one thing to remember is during that year, you're competing with many, many other companies. Remember, in the industry that I'm in, we have about 200 companies that have similar products. So, how does a company stand out? Pace over perfection is one way. So, here's what happens in my world. I talk to a customer today. We have a conversation, and that conversation can be about something detailed or it can be fairly superficial, and it really doesn't matter. But I've had a touch point with that client today. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I really want to be home by 6. Okay. I have other things to do. I just hung up the call. What's my plan now with that customer before I leave? Here's my plan. My plan is 100% of the time. I summarize that communication. I add value to that communication. I set an action item for the next thing, meaning that I'm the driver of pace within that sale. And I make sure of this, that I get home at 6, but then before I go to bed that night, while that customer is also resting, I forward to them all of the information I had just put together with the future action and the summary. And I make darn sure of this, that the first thing in the morning when they come to work, they can always count on having received that summary and that future action from me. It's my opportunity to show them I'm on time all the time. And I am what I say I am, which is somebody interested in them. And I do that over and over and over. Now, I could take an extra day, I could take an extra few days or a week to put a summary together that is completely and fully comprehensive and details absolutely everything that we have talked about and we have done. But that's not what I need. What I need is to show the customer in a moving, pace-driven way that there's value in a relationship with me, and that value is underlined by being timely. And you can always depend on me when you wake up in the morning. Pace over perfection. So listen, oftentimes in a business we have a heck of a hard time making decisions because there's lots of variables. So is there ever a perfect decision? No, come on. I don't really think there's ever a perfect decision. But trust yourself, trust your people just as you trust yourself. Understand that if you can build in a trust, I call it a trust tree within your organization, to where everybody on the tree is trusted, then the goal is to figure out how to make a decision, how to make it now, and how to go about making a different decision the next day if you need to. And I'll leave you with one last thing that is a story of mine that really I think was a change for my business that moved us from a very good company to a global leader. A single decision that I made. We had been selling our product to contact centers in the US, in North America. On a Friday afternoon, late, one of our salespeople walked into my office and said, "Hey, Steve, I've got this guy on the phone from the Philippines." And now, listen, we hadn't been selling to the Philippines. So he said, "Look, I've got this guy from the Philippines and he wants to buy our system now." I said, "What? What do you mean now? You mean he wants to learn about our system?" He said, "No, no, no. He wants to buy our system now. Buy it." Well, understand this. In our industry, nobody buys a system on impulse. These are well thought out things that are totally impactful to somebody else's business and our business requires a lot of planning and insight and thinking through all of the details. As I said earlier, it's months, even years, to really make a final decision on things like this. So here's a call, and the guy wants to, and it's the Philippines, and we didn't know the Philippines at the time. And, frankly, suspect, suspect, suspect. So I was left there, and my first reaction was, never mind, it's not real. But my second my second thought was, that's it. What if it is real? We could use a sale. And we've been wanting to go over there to the Philippines, and maybe there's something in it. So I said to him, look, call that guy and tell him this. Tell him that and this was all happening within a matter of 5 minutes max. Call him up and tell him that I will be there on Monday morning in the Philippines. And if they could, we'll send my information of where I'll be staying. And if they could meet me at my hotel on Monday morning. I didn't know anything else about this situation, but pace and movement was important. But I did know this: if I did nothing, nothing would happen. If I did something, I may learn something, I may gain something. And in the worst case, I'll lose something that I can recover, which is a trip, a few days. So without knowing any more, I jumped an airplane, flew through the weekend, landed there, I think, at midnight on Monday morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. Had never been to the Philippines, went to my hotel, got ready for my early meeting, which was, I think, at 9 o'clock. The customer came. He came in a limo, took me into his limo, and drove me around, and showed me what he was planning to do. And what he was planning to do was to build contact centers on the top floor of all of the malls that this group owned throughout the Philippines. It was one of the wealthiest families in Asia, and it turned into one of the most influential deals I had ever done. So I said, tell me why, George, you're choosing us. And why are you choosing us without sight unseen? He said, it's not sight unseen. I know people in America that use your product. I've looked at your product, I've seen it, and I've been given a challenge that I immediately have to get a deal done. And the company we have been talking to, another American company, I don't want to work with them, but I have to make a decision this week because we're on a time frame that I have to work with. So what happened is I said, okay, I understand it, and we can do it. We got to meet each other. He and I became deep, deep friends to this day. We've stayed in each other's homes. We've enjoyed a long relationship, and that led to us at one time being the predominant company selling contact center systems in that part of the world at that time. And it happened because we put pace over perfection. Listen, you all have stories that can do exactly what I'm doing, opposite, and say, I can give you example after example of perfection over pace, care over quickness. We all have rationales and stories to support the way we've done our business and lived our lives. But here's the thing. My lesson is something I've learned that nobody really had talked to me about. And so every time I did it, I was a little scared. Every time I did it, I wasn't sure if I was a little crazy, but I did it. And it's good for you to know that when you're doing that too and putting pace over perfection, that it's okay and somebody else has done it. And they had a successful outcome time after time after time. I've given some pretty significant stories that were game changers in my own life. and in my own career. And it always had to do with pace over perfection. I'm going to leave you with this. Remember this. We've all learned a lot by the time we get to wherever we are. And in the fact that we've learned a lot, our internal computer is always working. It's always there and it's always working. So while I consciously am not sure of what to do, and I have other factors affecting what to do, what I want to do, like fear, uh, like fear is the biggest thing in the world. It holds me back all the time. So if I can manage my fear and trust my computer and my life's experiences that have gone into that, then move, move, move. And with that, listen, we'll talk another time. Thanks for joining me for this. It's been great to talk to you from my hotel room, or is this a cell in Fort Lauderdale, Florida? You all take care and have a great weekend and enjoy your springtime.